next guest is Kristen Gasparini. She was a volunteer at AE 9/11 Truth, and she's also a very talented musician and writer. Not long ago, she released a music video called La Caverne, and she actually corrected me at the end of the show where we talked about it. So I think I'm pronouncing it right, but she'll tell me if I'm not in just a moment. But this music video highlighted Building 7 along with other issues, and she's going to be having an article published in Covert Action magazine about World Trade Center 7. Now she's got an ambitious 9/11 truth-related project that she is pursuing, and she's going to be telling us all about it here today. Kristen, welcome to Dawn of the Truth.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And yes, that was the correct pronunciation. It also has the title in English, in parentheses, it's The Caves.
The Caves, just like Plato's allegory about the cave. Yes, right. I'm getting so much better at my foreign pronunciations, guys.
Yes, you are.
I am. I'm putting effort into it. Molto bene, right?
Molto bene, yes.
All right, beautiful. All right, so let's just jump into it. Tell our audience what you are doing with this project and what it is.
Yes, so the project is called Hacking the Propaganda System through a plan that allows us to focus mass attention at a time where really the weapon of choice seems to be scattering collective attention, since all of us worldwide have come to realize that there are varying degrees of deception within our governments, our institutions, the way that we are being controlled, the information that we are being fed. Nobody is buying it completely anymore. However, there seems to be an issue, which is that even though that is the case, we are not able to come together to counter that, because there is so much happening at any given point in time. Attention is purposely being scattered and concentrated in echo chamber fashion here and there, depending on like what group you belong to, because obviously the powers and entities in questions have incredible amount of data that they can analyze and manipulate accordingly, so that they can silo people into different milieus of thinking, depending on their previous beliefs, previous conceptions. And there is also this phenomenon where we are artificially pit against one another, which is why even though we all realize essentially that we are governed by a psychopathic elite, there's seemingly nothing that we can do about it. So this is a plan to try and solve that issue. And the way we do that is by instead focusing mass attention. We intentionally leverage the different channels that now are mostly independent. Lots of people don't really care for mainstream media anymore, or at least the people who have realized that something is wrong. And this spans a good number of people. I think that there is, at this point globally, probably a minority that would trust everything mainstream media says, or at least, at the very least, there is a very substantial minority that doesn't trust it and will look for alternative media sources. So if we can leverage the people who have established audiences, which would be, on the left, on the right, across the political spectrum, your Russell Brands, your Tucker Carlsons, your Cornel Wests, like people from across the spectrum, people who are very critical of the system one way or another, be able to reach out to them, to explain the plan to them, and without telling them what to say, like allowing them to maintain their usual focus, because this is the proposal is to keep establishing the trust with the audience that you already have, but always focus on the matter of Building 7. Why Building 7? Because it is an issue of, it's connected to an issue, or the issue of most global significance. Like if you go to any IR department, 9/11 is defined as the defining moment of the new millennium. It connects to many other instances of power abuse. So for example, the crux here is that 9/11 represents the justification by which we still allow insane amount of money to go to the Department of Defense that has never passed an audit and that is using that money to fund, foreign regimes and their brutal genocides and the rest. So how do we begin to stop that? Well, you have to cut at the heart of the issue, which is stop that funding, or make it so that some dynamic within that apparatus shifts that process. So 9/11 is, of course, the narrative that justifies that. And I might say with some confidence that unfortunately, like, a large majority of Americans still hasn't heard of Building 7, which is the easiest point to pick apart in that narrative. And possibly a lot of Americans within the Department of Defense, from, the lowest ranks to the highest ranks. Like, there seems to be a lot of very effective compartmentalization in the way that these institutions work. Edward Snowden said something to that effect, like, no one part of the NSA knows what the other part is doing. So if we publicly are able to focus mass attention, so repeatedly talk about over a period of time, Building 7, specifically connecting it to all of the other issues that we care about. So if you're a socialist, you'll talk about how, this hinders the creation of socialism because, Building 7 and the Department of Defense are just like such examples of how power is concentrated. If you want to liberate Palestine, you're going to focus on how 9/11 is allowing for continued spending on weapons that are sent to Israel. If you want to stop climate change, then you are going to focus on how the Department of Defense is the #1 polluter, environmental polluter on the world stage. And if you are a conservative and if you want to uphold the Constitution and if you want to just, make America great again, because here the point is, you want to get to the best core of what people believe and show them how one issue actually connects them all and how the division amongst ourselves is actually pretty artificial. So this is actually a great opportunity to weave back together those fractures that have just been imposed upon us. And then we can, keep resolving our differences later. What we want to do is get the bullies out of power first. I think everyone agrees that there are bullies in power, that the whole point of these defense systems was to keep the bullies in check. Instead, we are run by them. So this is the simplest issue, Building 7, the way that it comes down, the insane amounts of information that we have today with all the works that architects and engineers have done, lawyers for and truth, all of the correct procedures to bring it to light. Our cards are in order with respect to that in every sense. University of Alaska Fairbanks study, all of it. We have all the cards in place. All we have to do is coordinate an information operation that brings mass attention to the issue nationally and internationally. Ideally, this would happen over the course of the next year leading up to the 25th anniversary, but I don't think that we should, necessarily give ourselves a hard deadline. I think this should be continuous, because insofar as this becomes sort of like the hinge, or sort of like the linchpin around which conversation about power abuse in any way people with their audiences want to approach it, as long as this is the focal point, we will be directly countering the strategy and tactic of attention scattering that is keeping us paralyzed in this moment where so many are waking up and realizing that either we do something now or things are going to get very, very grim. They are getting very, very grim, unfortunately. This is the broad overview. The plan is quite detailed, and there's obviously procedure to do with it, and possibly people to be approached first, people to be approached after, care taken in, kind of having people understand that we cannot be doing this guilty by association game anymore. Like, we have to be open to understanding that even though we have different points of view, the point here is to mend those and to actually focus on what we all agree on. Otherwise, this is never going to work. Like, that's how they get us, so to speak. Like, if we continue this, cancel culture, and I'm not going to talk to you because you think this or you think that, that's not going to get us very far. We want to reach the broadest possible audience through their representatives, so people who have established channels, and putting those people in conversation around the same question. What does global institutional power abuse look like to you? What do you think about Building 7? If you've never seen it collapse, let's show every time the compilation of the building collapsing. And let's have an open conversation about what it would mean if everyone was paying attention to the same thing at the same time, for us to actually focusedly try and turn the tide.
You talk about the fractures in society as a result of all of these issues that come up, which are related to 9/11, even in sort of maybe even more obscure ways, like with the politics and all of that. But I remember thinking, like 10 years ago, having some kind of conflict with the bunkers or whatever. It's like, how many of these people would I be able to just absolutely get along with, sit down and have a beer with, and just be another person, had it not been for September 11th, had this wedge not been driven into our society. And that is one of the great tragedies of September 11th. We always think about the people who died that day, of course, and the wars that followed, all of the endless wars overseas and the money spent on that, but just the small little tragedies from day to day of people at each other's throats. Because people didn't think about these things as much before September 11th. So yes, we need to kind of bring people back to World Trade Center 7, because once you see that come down, you don't even have to be a trained engineer. Just intuitively, there's something wrong with the story that we have been given. So listening to you, it sounds like, and tell me if I'm characterizing this correctly or not, it sounds like you're going to be reaching out to major opinion leaders from different spheres, right, left, doesn't matter, and trying to normalize the World Trade Center issue, make this a common topic of conversation and bring things back to it, even if it's, Gaza, or the political leanings that people have. Try to use the World Trade Center evidence, Building 7, to normalize the issue, make it less taboo. Is that a proper characterization that I'm given?
Yes, with the added reasoning step that Building 7 is the quickest way to get to the issue of putting the Department of Defense, the U.S. military, under control. Because 9/11 has to do with, the way the military was, lambasted forward even more after the event. It was further funded. And unless you want to, if you want to stop climate change, if you want to stop genocides, you have to stop the bombs from coming. That's really the issue. So the quickest way to put an end to the most urgent issues, even if we are concerned about, possibly nuclear confrontation between China and Russia, like this is a concern that people legitimately have, you need to have the mafia within the Department of Defense under control, or purged out of the system. So I think Building 7, relating so closely to 9/11 and the way that money was massively funneled in a completely intransparent way. And here I'm referring to Catherine Austin Fitt's work on the missing trillions, which at this point I think we're like well over $50 trillion of unaccounted for transactions. That is what is keeping this whole thing afloat. And it connects to everything else. It connects to money laundering. It connects to, the possibly like the blackmailings, pedophilia operations relating to Epstein. It probably connects to COVID and the way that that crisis was managed. So that is we need to normalize building 7, but we need to put it at the center of the focus because it's the quickest possible way to get to stopping the most uncontrollable aspect of our crisis, which is a violence apparatus that is completely deranged.
Yeah, I mean, and Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. If I had a kid to give advice to, I would say anytime you got money flowing through anything, you are going to attract the people who want to get their hands on it, and they are going to do the most despicable things to try to get their hands on that money. And of course, as you get bigger and you got bigger money-making operations, for instance, war. If you got a whole industry based on war, what are you going to get more of? More war, right? So there's been so much money made in the post 9/11 wars, especially. I mean, we got the money flowing and it's on a river of blood. Now, I'd like to see us try to take some of that energy and put it into civilian space flight and all these cool things we were promised when I was a kid. When I was growing up, we were promised that we were going to have moon bases and go to Mars and flying cars and stuff. And instead, we got 9/11 and the war on terror and COVID and all this stuff. So I feel a little bit gypped, but we can still make that happen. That's my economic plan for when I run for president in 2059 or 2060. But I'm not going to run for president now. But no, but this is absolutely the biggest problem that we have here. If you want to have more of something, you subsidize it. And all of this money spent on defense since September 11th, and yet the TV just tells us to be more scared, that the threats are ever increasing, right? I mean, and now last year we were worried about nuclear war with Russia. There was a period of time where this actually seemed like a viable thing. Has this made us more secure in the world? I don't think so. So I absolutely support this plan. We need to get the mafia out of the Department of Defense. I look at governments as competing mafias all over the world, and it's always been that way since the beginning of time. But there's times where it's even worse, right? And we're in one of those times now. What are some of the challenges that you see facing in trying to implement this project?
So the first one would be to get the ball rolling. I think it's really important procedurally to begin with people who are very much respected across the board and paid attention to by many people across the board who would, be concerned with power abuse. Ideally, if we could get someone like Catherine Austin Fitts and Whitney Webb, who are looking at some of the deepest aspects of the crisis and the most intricate to sort of, read the plan, evaluate it, and then suggest the next most beneficial people to reach out to, who then can reach out to the next most beneficial people. What we don't want is to just do this at random. I think this has to look like a chain of trust. And Catherine Austin Fitts talks about this quite a lot. The currency of the future will actually be trust. And what we don't want is to have trolls be part of the project. We don't want people who are invested intentionally or unintentionally in creating further division or in muddying the waters. We have to be very careful with the usual COINTELPRO tactics that might be waged against this this plan. This plan is sort of designed to be completely out in the open, to not have to worry about surveillance. Let's just assume all of our communications are controlled and monitored and everything like that. We have to just, the way I designed it is, how do we win a game against entities that can see their cards and all of our cards, and we can only see our cards? We just don't worry about it. We just have the conversations. We build these little nodes of trust that kind of act like neurons with synapses that open in different directions, and we just reach the audiences in a way that establishes this further goal, but such that we are also building resilience in the system, in our networks as we do so, in a way that is absolutely respectful, in a way that completely focuses on the end goal and understands what needs to be put aside in the meantime. I think the difficulty will be obviously like identifying disruptions and infiltrations if they happen. But I think if we do this well, and if we begin this in the right way and go as slow as we need to go, we don't need to do this by the 25th anniversary date. I think this should be something that goes on independently, as long as different audiences are reached and the mainstream media is eventually infiltrated. So if we make enough noise at the bottom of the media and information environment, eventually mainstream media will be forced to pick it up. And then what happens is a cascade effect of forced action, especially like this is explained well in the plan. So the intelligentsia of today has been very wary of touching anything conspiracy because it just immediately ends your career, apparently. But if there's so much evidence out there, and if it becomes a social fact that you can no longer keep your eyes away from a building that was not hit by a plane and fell in 7 seconds and blah, 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 then it just forces the entire system to switch the way that it reasons about its functioning. Like it can no longer, like the emperor actually has no clothes and everybody can see it. So the care is into building this chain in a way that is trust-based and responsible, and with people who understand the plan, do not wish to be the center of attention. Like this is something that we should do without claiming credit in any one particular point. Like I do think architects and engineers will be the focal point because they are the people that the conversation will always go back to, and hopefully when this gets big enough, then you force a debate between architects and engineers and NIST, which has not happened to this day, a public debate, so that then you just have your proof. And if NIST just refuses, and there you have it. Like, why don't you want to have a debate if so many people are demanding it at once because they want clarity? So apart from the focus on the work of architects and engineers, this is a decentralized information plan, which in a magical way just happens to bring the focus back whilst respecting the angle that each point person will want to keep with their audiences.
Wow. Infiltration and COINTELPRO. You ever deal with that, Craig?
I think it's a myth, Andy.
I
I'm just
don't know.
kidding. No,
We never deal with that around here.
I think we have a few in the 9/11 truth movement, I think.
Well, that's a topic for another day, but no, this sounds very well thought out, and I know there's a lot of passion, and you're working with other people. And what typically happens is when we talk about people's plans on one of these specials, all of our viewers want to get involved and help out in all of this. So if people want to follow this and lend their hand and trying to implement what you're laying out here, how can they do that?
So I guess the next step would be to somehow publish the plan. Right now it's sitting in a Google Doc. It would be perhaps useful to be able to secure the Google Doc somehow so that it's not modifiable. There's, ideally, so the plan describes a way in which we do this, and it's kind of on a blockchain. Ideally, that's how we'd want to do it. We would want this to not be corruptible in any way. We want the conversations to be recorded, publicly accessible, publicly auditable, and just unchangeable. I think there are good applications of blockchain that allow for trust to, actually be a component. But yeah, so publishing the document somehow, publishing the plan, ideally through you guys, reaching out to the first couple people who, for sure, maybe you have talked to, given the power and information circles, conversations that we're all having. So reaching the first couple people, and then let those people, reach out to the next person that they maybe had an interview with, and design a conversation that's both tailored to their audiences, but also focuses back on World Trade Center 7. So like the broad question is, right, how do you see power abuse? Like, what is the root of it all, and how do we get to it? And then we propose Building 7, and then we say, why not? Like, some people think that maybe COVID should be the focus. I thought about it too. I just think that there are so many facets of that crisis, and it might get so complicated in terms of actually knowing what gain of function is and all that stuff. It just might be a bit too much for the broad public to understand. I think that if we show the Building 7 falling massively around the world and tell them, right, this wasn't hit by a plane, it's going to just click a bit quicker for most people. But I think it's legitimate to also talk about, you know, other options and other strategies in the meantime, as long as this one is discussed and sort of like evaluated at the same time.
You said earlier, trust is the currency of the future. God, I love that statement. That gives me hope. And you know,
I will credit Catherine Austin Fitz for that. She does quite a few interviews, and that struck me as well as absolutely true. Just like nerd out for a second here, but like when you study social epistemology, which is how do we know what's true collectively, it all boils down to trust at the end of the day. Yes, we have the scientific method. Yes, we have empiricism and everything, but in the way that knowledge moves in society, trust is the main factor. And we are now going through the period in history where trust is breaking down at a mass level. So
that's it. And I only work with people that I trust. So no, that is so true. And I'm going to carry that one forward with me. I may even use it on future shows. Kristen, you were very young when 9/11 happened, but here you are taking up this issue. I know you are very hopeful, and I know you got a lot of passion for this. And we are all about hope and sending people off into the new year. The new year starts for me after the 9/11 anniversary. So in the last few minutes here, send our audience off with a message of hope. Why do they need to continue pushing for justice on this issue?
Because we're so close to making the world that we actually want to live in. We have all of the resources. We have all of the knowledge. We have insane technology. We should not be scared of the technology that we make. It is about how we use it, and it is about getting the bullies that are controlling it now out of the way so we can democratize it. Democratize information, democratize AI, democratize resources. Actually give back to all those parts of the world that have bled their veins dry up to this day, to give us the opportunity to build all this stuff, return what needs to be returned in every sense, and there will still be enough for everybody to share. This is not utopia. This is happening in certain parts of the world. It's just that there is such imbalance in the overall system that we still see awful things occurring at the same time. But the way that this control system is set up actually stands on like a razor blade. And that razor blade is public opinion. Like, it sounds kind of crazy, but that's actually how it works. There is a collective spell that we are under, and that allows for the insanity to continue. If we break that spell, these people have no actual power, because we have the numbers, we have the spirit, which honestly, since they're so obsessed with control, they might not have so much of that. I will say they have the violence apparatus, and that hurts. So that is why I think our main focus should be to infiltrate that, to break that from within, and to honestly say, the military, right? It's supposed to protect people. There are so many people to actually protect. There are so many operations to be done in terms of food distribution, in terms of disaster relief, in terms of climate change mitigation. in terms of picking up trash from the ocean. You can use all those boats. You can use all that equipment for this stuff. There is no upheaving the system where like any one part is made obsolete overnight. No, you can use the resources, and you can understand the definition of the institution that it is that you want to use, and actually make it work for what it was supposed to work. So there is absolutely hope. We absolutely do have everything that we need. We just need to coordinate a little better. And again, with the technology that is emerging today, whether it's blockchain, whether it's AI, all of this information can be democratized and like sorted through in a way that is unprecedented, that now these people are doing for their benefit, for their profit. But if we applied it to us and took them off their throne, this is doable. This is absolutely doable.
Wow, a lot of energy there, and we're going to be keeping an eye on your work and letting our supporters know when you do your new projects and write your new articles. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great one. Thank you for having me.